Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another installment of Trek Talk, where I take a look at the original Star Trek series, episode by episode, give some of my thoughts on it, talk about some of the behind the scenes information. I'll again be looking at These Are the Voyages, the book by Mark Cushman, which gives some information on the creation of these episodes. And today, we'll be looking at Mudd's Women. So, Mudd's Women was the third episode produced for the series. And I'll be again looking at Mark Cushman's book. So, let me go ahead and get that here. Now, this is one of those beloved episodes that really just exemplifies Trek in the minds of a lot of folks, I think. And it also introduces us, of course, to the character of Harry Mudd, one of Star Trek's more popular side characters or antagonists. Although he's not really a villain, he's just more of a nuisance than anything. And he provides an excellent foil for the Star Trek crew. So, this episode was written by, the teleplay is by Stephen Candell, although John Black and Gene Roddenberry also did some work on this episode as well, all working from an original story by Roddenberry. The director is Harvey Hart. Now, this is from the October 8th, 1966 issue of TV Guide. The Enterprise intercepts a spaceship commanded by a wily scoundrel, Captain Harry Mudd, a convicted smuggler whose only cargo is three stunning women. Oh, hey. Hey, Lord Thoth. Thank you for stopping by, sir. Always good to see you. Glad you dropped by. Now, Cushman, here's what he writes about the episode himself. So, intended to be sold as wives to lonely but wealthy space settlers, the women have an alluring effect on the crew of the Enterprise, so much so that Captain Kirk and his officers believe some unknown element is at play. One woman in particular, Eve, has even been causing the unflappable Kirk to lose his cool. But Kirk has little time to solve the mystery. The energy of the ship's engines diminished after a chase through space and the rescue of Leo Walsh, aka Harry Mudd, and his cargo has placed the captain in a compromising position. Deal with Harry Mudd and the rogue's terms, or run the risk of never making it back to safe harbor. Kirk's only hope is to convince Ben Childress, a leader of three lonely miners on the otherwise unpopulated and inhospitable planet of Rigel 12, to sell him the energy source his drained ship needs, the lithium crystals. And these seem like, because they call them lithium crystals, this obviously is kind of the precursor to dilithium crystals, probably because someone told them, lithium is like a real element and it's not like this at all. So you need to come up with something else. But Childress has already struck a deal with Mudd. Kirk will receive no help from the miners unless they get the women and Mudd is freed. The theme of this episode: outer beauty is a product of inner beauty and peace of mind. Confidence and self worth will change literally will change how a person is perceived by others. As for drug use, belief in one's self must come from within, not from a bottle of pills. Okay, so Mudd's Women glides effortlessly between drama and humor. Adding to the fun is watching Spock bend a pointed ear to observe the weaknesses of the human condition, allowing us to see ourselves through the eyes of this curious alien. There are many tense moments at the outset of the story as the lithium circuits blow and eerie quiet and darkness envelop the ship. And then the ship is suddenly light years away from home instead of mere months. As the story enters its final act, there are some inconsistencies. Why does Ben Childress's living quarters look so much different outside than in? A cylindrical metal prefab hut suddenly becomes something that looks more like a cave, and the furnishings aren't fabricated but appear to be made of wood. And so are his pots and pans, too. They're made of wood. On a planet that is clearly devoid of trees. Wouldn't Ben have goggles and a particle mask handy for his trips outdoors? And how can Eve's final transformation from drab to beautiful be explained? She took no drug, yet her eyelashes suddenly grow, her lips are suddenly coated with lip gloss, and her hair miraculously becomes styled. Right. Yeah. Despite the nitpicking, Mudd's Women is well deserving of its classic status. The crisp writing and the story's profound message are bolstered by top notch performances and stylish direction. Encouraged by director Harvey Hart, Jerry Finnerman's lighting is filled with those picturesque half tones he longed to create. So, yeah, this story actually originates from an outline titled The Women, which was one of the three outlines that he originally wrote when he was pitching Star Trek to NBC for the first pilot. The other two episodes that he wrote originally were an episode called Landru's Paradise, which would later be rewritten and become Return of the Archons, and The Cage, which is what the network eventually picked. The story in Roddenberry's early draft served as a blueprint for what was finally filmed, except for one big difference. In Roddenberry's original treatment, there is no Harry Mudd. That character would be added by writer Stephen Candell. Let's see. So, according to Cushman, the biggest hurdle in getting the women on TV was its subject. Prostitution and drugs were hardly the type of thing NBC wanted in the primetime schedule. Helping the network to swallow the bitter pill was Candell's addition of the flamboyant, conniving Harry Mudd into Roddenberry's story of what are essentially hookers in space. Candell said, quote, I originally had the idea of a traveling salesman and con man, the medicine salesman in The Wizard of Oz that ends up as the wizard, the sort of con man hustling wherever he can, a lighthearted, cheerful song and dance man version of a pimp. This sleight of hand trick worked, and Mudd effectively distracted the otherwise worrisome NBC censors from the hot topic issues at play in the story. We were talking about we are talking about television in a primeval state, said Candell. There was always something that was too hot to handle. We thought in a science fiction setting, it was possible to do some stories that you couldn't do in a street crime drama. So we treated this as if it were like the American West, mail order brides. What else could you call them? And we took it from there. Now, producer Robert Justman was concerned over the number of characters in the script, and he suggested that Mudd's women, as well as the minors, originally there were five of them. There were five women and five minors, but they cut that from four and eventually down to three. Let's see, and there were some other things that Justman wanted cut from the script. Apparently, in the original script, there's this little creature that apparently was going to be like a koala bear, but with like horns glued on it or something. That was going to be a pet that Mud would carry around, kind of like a pirate with a parrot or something. And on Rigel 12, there was a scene where Childress is driving this kind of like digging machine around, and Justman said, "Look, just cut that out because we're not doing that. That's too much money." Let's see. Now, the final shooting script placed McCoy and Scott in the transporter room with Mr. Spock, allowing him to see the immediate reaction the others had to the girls. It was a delightful moment as the trip down the corridors and the close proximity inside the elevator with their escort. You can credit writer John Black for picking Spock as the escort and giving Harry Mudd the line about a pretty face not turning the head of this one, the Vulcanian. And credit director Harvey Hart for the push in on Spock's face, revealing the anguish that tells us Mudd's statement is not necessarily true. Yeah, yeah, this is one of the real classic episodes. I agree. Lord Thoth, there's so many. I swear that first season, particularly like the first half season of Trek, there are just so many great episodes just in those first few. Naked Time, Enemy Within, Mudd's Women, Corbin might maneuver, of course. Balance of Terror. Now, let's see. Now, Roddenberry. Let me see. Okay, no way. So Justman at one point said. So Justman was concerned about how they were gonna pull off the. Yeah, yeah. I think every tricker does, don't they? Because again, there's just so many good and that's the best season of the first series. So Justman was concerned about how they were going to pull off the change of these women from being, gorgeous to being homely and then back again, and how that was going to work. And he was also concerned about the message being delivered at the end and making sure that was part of the story because he felt that was an important part of it. And at one point, he sent a note saying, I would like to see Ben finally say that he does want Eve as she is, and vice versa. That is, her without the help of the drug, the Venus drug. I have a feeling that we may have left this fact unresolved for the audience. I'd just like to see Ben finally give in and admit that he has been wrong and indicate strongly how much he wants Eve. This change was made, but only after Eve transforms back to beautiful, therefore losing the whole point of Justman's recommendation and doing it somehow without the drug is the thing. At this point, Roddenberry had taken over and completed his rewrite, the final draft, which was done on May 26th, with additional revised pages arriving on June 2nd and June 6th. His rewrite here, as with many of the early informative scripts, was substantial. Wounded writers could and often would complain, but a close comparison of first draft and final draft scripts clearly demonstrate the transformation from something better suited for an anthology series to something that was, by its nature and its execution, Star Trek. Women don't need drugs, they are all lovely. Well, these ladies certainly don't need it. I mean, it's always kind of funny when Hollywood tries to take gorgeous women and kind of ugly them up, and it's just so obvious that, like they'll take some gorgeous actress and then put her in like a sweatshirt and a pair of glasses and like have her tie her hair back or something. It's like, oh, look, she's plain and homely, and then she gets a makeover and suddenly she's stunning. Gee, I never saw that coming. Okay. But a close comparison of first draft and final draft scripts clearly demonstrate the transformation, yeah, from something better suited for an anthology to something that is by its nature Star Trek. Stephen Kendall understood this and with no trace of animosity in his voice later said, quote, "Oh yes, Gene rewrote. He loved to meddle. No script was ever finished." And Lortha says, like glasses gets me hot. Some women, I mean, it kind of depends on the glasses they're wearing. I kind of find it kind of interesting how some of the styles of glasses that became popular kind of like in the early like 21st century, like in like the late 90s, early 2000s, they were the style that, when I was a kid, only like old ladies wore, like your grandmother would wear something like that. And they were completely out of fashion, and no young woman would ever want to wear them, but like so many things, it eventually came around to where that style of glass or eyewear was popular again. And yeah, also, of course, eyewear did become more accepted, and yeah, it became more uh, reasonable to look at women in glasses and think they were really attractive. You probably remember Lord Thoth. What was that old saying? Boys don't make passes at girls that wear glasses. Isn't that how it went? Okay, so and of course, for the key role of Harry Mudd, they cast character actor Roger C. Carmel. Carmel, and this is the thing that blows me away reading about this episode. Roger C. Carmel was 33 when he did this episode, and if you'd asked me, I would have swear, oh, he's like 45, you know, something like that. No, he was 33. Um, it's like, wow, really? That's one of the sobering things about reading about these episodes is so many of these actors, even some of the ones that were older, I look and I'm older than them now, and I'm just like, oh man, how did that happen? Okay, so Roger C. Carmel was the obvious choice to play Harcourt Fenton Mudd. He had been successfully making the rounds on television, gaining more attention with each appearance, including multiple turns on The Naked City, The Man from Uncle, and I Spy. Joe DaGosta said of Carmel, quote, he was working all over town and he was a well-known flamboyant character actor. He was just one of those great, interesting actors with a lovable, joyful kind of personality, a bigger than life kind of character. He was the right person for that role. And when you look at his contribution, maybe the only person for that role. Yeah. Yeah. He was the ideal choice for that role. And the people who work on the show also thought so. Stephen Candell said, I was immensely happy. I thought he was terrific. Roger C. Carmel was perfect. And John Black, who also contributed to the script, said, I liked Roger C. Carmel and I loved him in Mud's Women. I thought he was so charmingly large. He played the character so broadly, but he was good at it. Now, Carmel himself said, quote, you saw how they dressed me in many of the roles I played at that time, not the best fitting clothing. But this character was like a tailor-made suit for me. The moment I read the script, I knew how to play him. And that was met by complete support when I stepped in front of the camera by Harvey Hart and the cast. It was an absolute joy. So he had a really great time playing that role, which is always good to hear. You always like it when the people on the show enjoyed being on the show. Okay, so actually, in earlier drafts, Yeoman Rand was going to be in the story, but eventually, through rewrites, she was written out more due to budget concerns to keep the cast down more than anything else. This actually helped the story by enabling Kirk to better interact with Mudd's women and allowing the three females to have little competition. Karen Steele, who played the sympathetic Eve, was 35, a former model and cover girl. She was prominently featured in 1955's Academy Award winning film, which won Best Picture that year, 1955's Marty. And then she had the female lead in a number of B films, including, and I'm guessing this was a real gem of a movie, The Shark Fighters, in 1956, 1957's Bailout at 43,000 Feet, and 1959's Ride Lonesome, which was a Western. And she also appeared in a 1960s mob pick, Rise and Fall of Legs Diamond. Susan Denberg played Magda. She was the one in the blue dress there. She actually was from Poland, and she moved to America and became a Las Vegas showgirl. But she quickly went to Hollywood, and TV and film roles followed. Immediately after working here and prior to the first broadcast of Mud's Women, Denberg appeared in the 1966 issue of Playboy. James Doohan recalled Susan Denberg appeared as a centerfold playmate of the month when they were shooting the sequences where we're supposed to be ogling the women. I didn't consider that an acting challenge. She also had a co-starring role in the 1967 film Frankenstein Created Woman before leaving Hollywood and returning to Poland. Maggie Threat played the dark-haired Ruth. She appeared in an episode of The Wild Wild West alongside William Campbell, who would also play the Squire of Gothos, of course, and appear in Troubles with Tribbles. She also made her feature film debut this same year in a film called Dimension 5, a sci-fi film in which she starred alongside Jeffrey Hunter, Captain Pike. And then there was Gene Dynarski, who played Ben Childers, and he was also 33. That's another guy. I look at him, I think, oh, he's like 40. No, he was 33. He appeared on shows such as Ben Casey and The Big Valley. A reliable character actor, Dynarski would work steadily in television and return to the various Star Trek series more than once. Jim Goodwin, who appeared on TV from 1961 to 1979, and having small roles prior to this on series such as Surfside 6 and Combat, made his first of 3 visits to Star Trek as Lieutenant John Farrell. And also, this is an important episode because this is the first episode where Majel Barrett provides the voice of the Star Trek computer or Enterprise computer. She was bitter over losing her plum role of the ship's first officer, and Roddenberry kept his promise to Barrett and found a way to bring her back on board. And hail, Brian Hepburn. Hello, sir. Good to see you. And he says Frankenstein Created Woman is a pretty good Hammer. Oh, that's a Hammer movie. Really? I didn't know that. Interesting. Did that hmm. No, that wouldn't have. I don't suppose that probably didn't have Christopher Lee in it, right? Yeah, because he played Dracula. He played Dracula, not Frankenstein. Was it who did play Frankenstein in the Hammer films? I can't remember. It wasn't Cushing, was it? No, I don't remember. Okay, anyway, let's go ahead and get to the episode itself here. Okay, so uh this episode starts with the Enterprise. Oh, so it was Peter Cushing. Okay. I wasn't sure. Yeah. Okay, so my memory isn't entirely faulty. That's good to hear. Or good to know. So the Enterprise is pursuing an unknown vessel, which is uh, pushing its engines to the limit to escape from the Enterprise. And there you see it. You don't get a good look at the ship. We just kind of see it from the distance. And they're concerned about the strain this is putting on the Enterprise. And where is Huh. I thought I had an image of Uhura in here because this is another episode that has Uhura in the gold uniform. I thought I had one, but I guess I forgot to include one. Oh well. But yeah, she appears in her gold uniform in this, of course, before eventually changing to the red. So the ship's engines eventually overload and shut down, leaving the ship adrift and they're in an asteroid field because they had gone into this asteroid field to try and evade the Enterprise. And Kirk orders that the ship's shields be extended to reach around the ship. This puts a big strain on the Enterprise's systems as well. So then Kirk orders that the occupants of the ship be beamed aboard. But first, they start having a power outage on the ship as the quote unquote lithium circuits on the ship start to go out. As a result, we see these periodic blackouts. And oh, yeah. And I got to admit, when I was rewatching this, I couldn't help but noticing this pretty obvious stain on the floor here. I'm pretty sure that's a coffee stain that someone spilled coffee on the set and they just never cleaned it up. Okay, so Kirk orders that the occupants of the ship be beamed aboard, and they receive this gentleman who introduces himself as Leo Walsh. And he also tells them he has three more to be beamed aboard. An asteroid strikes the ship and destroys it, but they do manage to beam over the other occupants, who, of course, are three stunning women. And I just love this shot of mud here. This shot just kind of encapsulates the character so well. Him being just this kind of rascal, and the men, or at least Scotty and McCoy, are somewhat transfixed. Yeah, yeah. I think just about any man would be impressed. So McCoy and Scotty are entranced by the lovely new arrivals, while excuse me, Spock is more intrigued by the reactions of these men to the women than to the women themselves. As you can see in this shot, I just love it. One of the part of the fun of this episode is just watching Spock's sort of bemused reactions as he's just observing all the human men on the ship making themselves absolute fools for these women. So Kirk wants the occupants of the ship in his quarters to get an explanation, and we get this. Adega says Scotty has a weakness. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, don't most of us? It ain't just Scotty. And as they're passing through the hallways of the ship, we do get lots of shots of the men reacting to the women. They draw plenty of attention as they're walking through the hallways. And let me see, where was I here? And again, it's not as if there aren't women on the Enterprise. And I think, according to the book, it was a good idea to probably not have Rand around, because because there have been plenty of episodes where there are attractive women who are part of the Enterprise crew. And so kind of basically having no women around in this episode kind of helps play up how gorgeous these women are, and the notion that the men on the Enterprise are sort of these lonely, kind of horny guys who are out in space and with no women around, even though that's not really accurate. Okay, so they are brought to Kirk's quarters, and of course, Kirk is somewhat stunned to see these women. But Kirk is pissed about this whole mess, and he tells Leo Walsh that he'll be subject to a hearing about his conduct. While Walsh argues that Kirk has exceeded his authority. And of course, here we have this scene where Kirk says, uh, Mr. Walsh, is this your crew? And Walsh or Mudd says, no, Captain, this is me cargo. And again, just a kind of a priceless shot of Spock there. Now, on the bridge, Scotty tells Spock that that they blew the converter assembly when they used their shields to protect Walsh's ship. The ship is now dependent on one crystal, which can't handle channeling all the ship's power for long. Spock calls Kirk to the bridge. Meanwhile, Leo, Walsh, and the women are in the hearing room, and Walsh is allaying their fears about what's going to happen to them. And Kirk comes to the bridge, and they fill Kirk in on the situation with the converter assembly, and warn that, of course, the one remaining dilithium crystal can't channel all the ship's power for long. And Spock suggests that they travel to Rigel 12, which has a dilithium mining operation, and they can get the crystals they need there. And at one point, Scotty refers to Walsh or Mudd as a jackass. You know, he says that jackass not only destroyed his ship, he may have destroyed ours. To which Kirk says, well, if it makes you feel any better, Scotty, that jackass is going to pay for it. And I don't know. It just kind of surprised me watching this again after so long that, the word jackass is being thrown around rather casually on network television in the 60s. Just kind of surprising. Anyway, Spock orders Lieutenant Farrell to set course for Rigel 12. Kirk, in his log entry, notes the hypnotic effect the women are having on the crew and how he is concerned about it. Spock tells Walsh to state his name, which he says is Larry Mudd. The computer declares incorrect. And he admits that his name is Harcourt Fenton Mudd. Spock asks if he has committed any other offenses, to which he says, oh, no, no. And the computer again says incorrect. And Mudd gives one of my favorite lines where he says, blast that tin-plated pot. The computer then brings up Mudd's criminal record, showing that he has a long list of crimes that he has committed. Kirk then tells Mudd that he's being charged with several offenses and asks what Mudd's destination was and the purpose of his flight. Mudd responds that they were heading to Ficus 3 and that Mudd is, in his words, wiving settlers. That is, providing wives to men out on frontier worlds. Eve, who's the one in the pink dress, complains that they all came from worlds with no prospects for marriage and that they have husbands waiting for them on Ficus 3, and complains that Kirk is taking them in the wrong direction. Now, at this point, I believe Kirk asks the computer to scan the women and says, do you notice any unusual readings from the women? And the computer says, no unusual readings from the women, but then notes that it is there are unusual readings from the men in the Enterprise crew who have increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, and respiration. They're sweaty, clammy. We can only guess why. And again, Spock's just like, simping is illogical. Okay, where was I? Okay, yeah. So anyway, Kirk tells Mudd that he is going to be taken to the authorities and handed over to proper authorities, basically at a star base or something like that. And Eve is upset and says, well, what about us? What's going to happen to us? But then there's another power outage, and they find out that the battery reserve power that they're on, or no, that the final dilithium crystal has failed. That's it. And the reserve power that they're on is they're now on battery power, and they've only got a limited time to get where they're going. Now, of course, after they leave, Mud is thrilled when he hears about the mining colony, noting that these miners will be, hardworking men who are out alone on the frontier, probably for a long time. And as dilithium miners, dilithium is very valuable, so they're going to have a lot of wealth. And so he reassures the women, hey, we'll get an even better deal at this mining colony than we would have at Ficus 3. Of course, he would. I don't know about the women, but I don't think he's too terribly concerned about that. So in sick bay, the brunette, Ruthie, I believe is her name, she stops by sick bay and flirts with McCoy a bit. She stands next to one of his scanners, and it causes the scanner to go off in an unusual way, which puzzles McCoy. And he asks her if she's wearing anything unusual, like anything radioactive, which she says no, she's not. And she asks some questions about the miners and like if he's going to do any medical work on them. And he says something about how no, the miners, as far as we know, they're all in good health. Kirk goes to his quarters and discovers that Eve is there, not only in his quarters, but in his bed, no less. She says that she hid in his quarters because she was being made uncomfortable by all the crewmen who were staring at her. That doesn't really explain her laying in his bed, does it? But, okay, whatever. She tries to seduce Kirk, but she stops herself, saying that she can't go through with this, and she abruptly leaves. Now, in his cabin, Leo and the other two women are discussing the miners that live on Rigel 12. There are three of them, and they've been living alone on the colony for over a year. And of course, Leo notes the obvious pairing here. He's got three women, and there are three miners. And the women note that Harry can't leave his cabin, but Leo assures them that that's going to change. But then Eve arrives and says that she's not feeling well and telling Leo that it must be near time. Now, on the bridge, Kirk gives an order to Lieutenant Farrell here and has to repeat the order because Farrell is distracted. And Kirk expresses frustration that he's having to constantly repeat orders and men are distracted from their duties. He then turns to Bones and asks Bones if he's noticed anything or been able to find anything unusual about these women during his medical examination of them. And Bone says that he doesn't, he asks, do you mean like, are they aliens or illusions or something? He said, no, I can't find anything like that. And he's at a loss to explain why the women are so alluring. And Spock's like, simps. Now, Magda, yeah, yeah, Sulu, curiously, Sulu isn't distracted. I hadn't noticed. Now, Magda, the other blonde, she got a communicator from Lieutenant Farrell earlier in the episode, and Mudd uses the communicator to contact Rigel 3. And this kind of made me wonder, so what is the range on the communicators? Because there's still a pretty good ways out from this colony, yet he's able to use this handheld communicator to contact this world, which is, I mean, again, I don't remember how far away, but it's like they're not even in the Rigel system yet, are they? Because I always had the sort of thought that they can contact a ship up in orbit from the surface of a planet, but probably not much more than that. So this is a much longer way away. It feels like this is kind of a, kind of a continuity or kind of a sort of canon, sort of lore screw up. I don't think he should have been able to call the planet from that far away, but I don't know. It probably doesn't really matter that much. Let's see. Where was I? Okay, wait. I got to change. I got a second presentation here. Let me bring that up. Okay. So they get into orbit around the planet, and Spock notes that they can only maintain this orbit for, I believe it's 3 days and 7 hours. Now, in Harry's quarters, the women start to change, and they're now looking more haggard and more kind of homely looking. Harry gives them some pills, which they take, or at least Magda and Ruthie take immediately. Uh, Eve is a little more reluctant. She complains about the pills, saying that the pills are a cheat and she doesn't want to take it really. But of course, she does wind up taking it eventually. And of course, after taking the pills, they become beautiful and alluring again. Um, and it's like a magically they have makeup and their hair is better styled and everything. So Kirk and Spock meet with the miners and their leader, Ben Childress, who is this guy here. Um, he tells Kirk that he will exchange crystals for Mudd's women. And he also wants Mudd set free and all the charges against him dropped. Kirk is not happy about that at all. Kirk's like, "Who the hell do you think you are, mister?" And he rejects their terms. And again, Spock's just like, "You human men." Then Mudd and the women arrive, and the miners are, no surprise, they are quite smitten with the ladies. But Kirk still refuses to agree to their terms. But then the lights dim momentarily, and Spock notes that their reserve power is diminishing, which isn't good since what that is what's keeping them in orbit. And Mudd notes that Kirk's eventually just going to have to give in. He's like, "Look, you can give in now or later, but you will eventually. You'll have no choice." Now, Kirk and Spock beam down to the planet, and Kirk speaks with Childress and says that he will agree to Childress's terms and asks for the crystals. But Childress is in no hurry. He's basically trying to. Yeah, I mean they did get some lovely women for this episode. There's no doubt about it. But Childress is in no hurry. He's like, you're cramping my style, Kirk. He basically tells Kirk to buzz off and tries to put his moves on Eve. He asks her to dance, but she declines. Childress gets angry. He then cuts in on one of the other guys. The other two guys are dancing with the other girls and carousing. So he then takes the cuts in on one of the guys and claims Ruthie, the brunette. That guy then tries to break in on Magda and the other miner. They get into a fight. And while the scuffle's going on, Eve gets upset and flees out into the storm. Eve is kind of a drama queen. I mean, honestly, she's more than a little bit of a drama queen. She's like, "Oh, you're fighting over me. This isn't right. I'm gonna run out into this dangerous storm for no reason because I need attention." Okay, so they search for her out in the storm, but eventually Kirk and Spock go back up to the Enterprise to use the Enterprise's sensors while Childress looks for her. Now, on the Enterprise, Scotty warns that using the sensors for this is going to drain the batteries even further. Down on the planet, Childress does find Eve eventually and brings her back to his quarters, after which he passes out himself. At this point, they've only got a little time left before the ship's batteries are drained and they crash into the planet. But then they note the energy signature coming from Childress's quarters. Down on the planet, Childress wakes up and Eve is making a meal, and he sort of loudly complains about her and everything she's doing. But she makes him a meal, which he seems to like. But eventually, of course, the drug wears off and she becomes more kind of homely. Or, I mean, let's face it, she's not homely. She's just kind of plain because she's not done up. But again, we're talking Hollywood homely here, not normal world homely. And Childress, of course, is angry to discover she's not as attractive as she was. Childress is kind of a real dickhead here, honestly. But then Kirk and Mudd arrive, and Kirk makes Mudd admit the truth about the Venus drug, the drug the women take that makes them more beautiful. Childress is understandably very pissed about this, feeling like he was conned, which, let's face it, he kind of was. He tries to go after Mudd. Kirk breaks him up. And Eve scolds Childress, saying he doesn't want a wife. He just wants like a fantasy. So she takes one of the pills and takes it and then transforms back into lovely again, including having her hair be restyled and, yeah, like mascara and eyeshadow and everything. And then she asks Childress, is this what you really want? Do you want a fantasy, or do you want, a woman, a real woman who's going to be a partner for you, someone who will be a support to you, who will help you, and or do you just want this kind of gorgeous fantasy that's just going to be selfish and make demands upon you? Of course, then Kirk gives the big plot twist. Oh, that you just took a placebo, colored gelatin. She didn't really take the Venus drug, which, why did they even do that? Why would they then, upon finding out that about the Venus drug, why would then Kirk have, I guess McCoy would have made it, this fake pill and then let her take it? What is the point, other than just, of course, so that Kirk could then talk about how it's what's inside that counts? It's kind of, again, kind of contrived here, really. But not only is it contrived, but it's ridiculous because I mean, again, she literally changes. It's not like she just feels more confident, which is what the episode tries to sell you on. Oh, she just believed it would make her beautiful, and so because she believed she was more beautiful, she became more beautiful. Yeah, kind of a stretch there. And it really does kind of undermine the episode in a couple of ways, undermining the message of it, if nothing else. But anyway, at this point, Kirk demands the crystals, which Childress agrees to provide. Although I would note Kirk and Spock leave without getting the crystals. Um, so I don't know. Maybe they beamed them up or something. I don't know. Anyway, back on the ship, uh, Spock expresses relief that the whole thing is over with, saying it was, quote, a most annoying emotional episode. So yeah, a classic episode all around, and I think a favorite of most Trekkies. And guys, if any of you guys would like to come in here and talk with me and join me and talk about it at this point, let me know. I can put the link in the chat if you'd like to come in. But at this point, I'll go back to Cushman's book for a little bit more. Let's see. Okay, so when Stephen Candell first saw Mudd's Women, his immediate impression was, I thought it was terrific. They really pulled it off. and I thought that the special effects were excellent for their time. I was delighted. John Black said, Gene Roddenberry got away with murder with the network. The girls' outfits. My God, you couldn't do that on television back then. But he took the network on and he brought it to a standstill and he won every time. And William Shatner said, as for the drug angle, well, it's possible the network executives weren't aware of what was going on. That NBC allowed Mudd's Women to be produced at all is a minor miracle. So when the show premiered, this was on October 13th of 1966. It's it actually won its time period from the 8:30 to 9:30 block. It got a 31.4% share of the audience, beating out The Dating Game and My Three Sons. And then the second half hour from 9 to 9:30 was actually tied with the CBS Thursday night movie. And the show would get a rerun the following summer, and it would actually win both half hours in that rerun as well. And the book notes that the same week, TV Guide ran an article about how dreamy Mr. Spock was. Star Trek, with a repeat of Mudd's Women, tied or beat its competition during the hour run. Harry Mudd caught on fast, first with NBC executives, then with the viewing audience. And the lovable scoundrel would return. And yes, of course, Mudd would return in another episode of the original series, and he's in an episode of the animated series as well. I'm trying to think if there are any Star Trek novels that have Harry Mudd in them. I would bet there are, but I can't think of any. But yeah, I think overall, the episode, it tries to give this positive message about belief in yourself, and stuff. It's like, it's the forget the ring is Bobkiss, the power is in you, Lone Star, that sort of thing. Believe in yourself. It was you all along, you had the power all along and you didn't realize it, or something like that. And it's a positive, affirming message, but at the same time, it's kind of like that would have worked better if you hadn't had that absurd change with Eve at the end of the episode. If Childress had just accepted her as she was, rather than having the sort of trick of having her believing she's taking a pill and then somehow changing in anyway. Um, I don't know. I mean, if I was Childress, I'd just be like, I don't know, could you take it on the weekends maybe? That might be nice. Okay, so anyway, um, where are we at here? Yeah, so we're getting close to an hour, so I guess I will go ahead. Oh, I guess I should give a rating on this one and give a grade for the episode. And I'll give Mudd's Women, I think, a solid B, maybe a B plus. It would probably be an A if it weren't for, again, a couple of, I think, kind of questionable continuity things. And also, but mainly just for that change at the end where she takes the pill, but doesn't really take the pill, and yet somehow it still works. So grade B plus for this one. Classic episode, definitely. So thanks to everyone who may have joined in during the stream. Uh, and Lord Thoth, Brian Hepburn, and Adega, all of you guys, thanks for stopping by. And I'll go ahead and close out here. And I'll probably be back next week looking at another episode. I believe that'll be The Enemy Within, actually, another classic. Oh, what is this one? Okay, so Brian Hepburn says he was in the book Mudd's Angels from the early 90s. Oh, it's a novel. Oh, okay, so they just adapted the episodes. Mudd's Angels. Yeah, that is that is kind of a good way to put it, right? Okay. Anyway, again, thanks guys for tuning in, and like I say, I'll be back next week probably with The Enemy Within. Until I'll see you then, and have a good night.